So today we are diving into a topic that feels particularly relevant right now, the philosophy of travel. Why do we wander? And maybe more importantly, how can we make those journeys actually matter?
We're pulling the central arguments from a really brilliant set of sources, excerpts from the book, The Philosophy of Travel, Why We Wander.
Right.
And it's an approach that um, it immediately takes travel off the checklist and turns it into a genuine intellectual pursuit.
Exactly. Our mission today is to give you a genuine deep dive, a shortcut to understanding these foundational arguments.
Mm.
It's all about why simply changing your location can dramatically change your life. This isn't about booking advice or, packing tips.
No, not at all. This is about transforming simple movement into a meaningful, reflective experience.
And what's fascinating here is that the sources are not about where you go, but entirely about how you go.
That's the whole premise. I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't adjust your perspective, you just take your unresolved self and all your baggage to a beautiful new latitude.
Right. You're just you, but with a different background.
Exactly. The goal is to make sure that wherever you land, you engage in what the sources call a thoughtful journey.
Okay, so that's why we've structured this deep dive around the three core pillars the philosophy relies on.
Identity, ethics, and attention.
Right. These are the three mechanisms the sources suggest can turn any trip into a truly transformative experience.
And let's start with identity, because that's probably the most immediately challenging concept they introduce.
Yes, identity and displacement. So the philosophy kicks off with this argument that travel displaces more than just your location.
We all get the physical displacement part. You leave home, you cross a border. Simple enough.
But the book suggests the real work is all psychological.
Well, when we leave our familiar environment, we lose all those external cues that define us. Think about your daily life.
For sure. You're the boss, or you're the dependable daughter, the person who always orders the same latte.
Those are social roles. Or, as the sources put it, they're the stories we tell about ourselves.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Travel actively displaces those stories.
How so?
Well, when you're suddenly in a place where no one knows those stories, or maybe they don't even understand your language, those definitions just become irrelevant.
You're forced to operate outside of those fixed roles.
Exactly.
And that's the core engine of transformation. If your identity relies on, say, being the person who is always punctual,
Okay.
what happens when you travel to a country where punctuality is viewed completely differently and you miss appointments? You have to reconcile that.
And you have to do it without the comfort of your home environment telling you you're still the punctual one.
I think that's crucial. You can't lean on your professional title when you're just trying to negotiate a confusing public transport system in a foreign city.
You're just a human trying to figure things out.
Precisely. The removal of that constant societal reinforcement forces a critical look at your own self-narrative.
So you might realize the story you told yourself, that you're always anxious in new situations, doesn't really hold up.
Right. Not when the necessity of the moment requires you to be resourceful and brave. The internal journey is really triggered by the friction of the external one.
So if that external displacement succeeds in shaking those foundations, the next logical step is shifting focus from self to others.
Which moves us neatly into our second core idea, the ethics of encountering others.
And this is where the philosophy gets very direct with the modern traveler.
It does. The sources highlight that just by moving, we create an ethical dimension, a choice. Are we observing or are we consuming?
Are we genuinely encountering or are we just passing through?
Yeah, and the challenge here is to shift from seeing a place as just a backdrop for your vacation photos,
Right, for your Instagram feed.
to seeing it as someone else's complete, complex reality. It really challenges the inherent privilege that's often involved in travel.
So is it always ethical? That's the question the sources force us to ask. The encounter is a two-way street?
For sure. And the philosophy warns against becoming a consumer of culture, a passive observer who just checks off sites without engaging with the complex humanity of the location.
That's a really strong distinction. The ethical traveler isn't just polite, they are receptive.
Right, receptive. They approach new cultures with the humility that comes from realizing their way of life is only one possibility in a huge landscape of human experience.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this kind of ethical engagement is, well, it's the most effective antidote to our fixed assumptions.
It has to be. When you meet someone who lives a deeply fulfilling life under radically different structures than your own social, political, whatever, your own worldview is forced to expand.
It's the difference between reading a statistic about poverty and spending an afternoon talking to a small business owner who thrives despite huge obstacles.
One is data, the other is perspective.
And this broadening of perspective directly redefines what it means to belong.
How so?
Well, before that deep encounter, belonging might have been narrowly defined by your neighborhood or your nation. But after true ethical engagement, you realize belonging is far more expansive.
You start to realize the fundamental human desire for community and meaning. It transcends location, language, political systems.
Exactly. That feeling of shared humanity is what the sources claim we bring back, reshaping our definition of home entirely.
So home becomes less about a physical location and more about a state of receptivity.
That's right. And once we've addressed the internal reflection identity and the external interaction ethics, we have to move to the practical element,
The part that makes both of them possible.
which is the third core idea: travel as a practice of attention.
This concept is all about taking those philosophical intentions and actually applying them in real time.
It moves us past the logistical stuff, the schedule, the flight, and into the mindset of active observation.
Or what we can just call intentionality.
Right.
Intentionality is the lever here. The sources draw a really sharp line between passive consumption and active engagement.
So passive consumption is rushing to the famous statue, taking a picture, and immediately moving on.
Yeah, it's checking off a bucket list.
Active observation, on the other hand, means dedicating attention. It means slowing down.
It could mean choosing to spend an hour just watching how people navigate a public square, noticing the architecture, listening to the sounds.
Instead of trying to hit 5 museums in 3 hours.
Exactly.
Mm.
And the sources emphasize that this practice is critical because it forces synthesis, not just cataloging.
What do you mean by synthesis?
Well, when you slow down and notice the details, the smell of a spice market, the way the light hits an ancient wall, you create a kind of friction in your brain.
And that friction forces your brain to work differently. So instead of just saying, that's a nice church, which is a passive judgment,
You're asking, why did they build it this way? What does this stone tell me about the local history? How does the light in here affect my mood?
that active engagement is what locks the experience in.
Which raises an important question. How does dedicating attention fundamentally change the meaning we get from it?
Well, when you intentionally focus, you are effectively turning your brain into a philosophical processing unit.
Right. The trip becomes a deliberate, thoughtful journey because you're demanding more from your senses and your intellect than just sensory input.
And this practice of sustained attention is what makes the first two concepts even possible.
You can't displace your self-stories, the identity part, if you're too rushed to even notice the friction.
And you certainly can't engage ethically with others if you're too distracted by your phone or your schedule to truly see them.
It creates a virtuous loop. Intentional attention leads to deeper encounters, and those encounters provide the friction you need to challenge your fixed beliefs. It's the methodology of transformation.
So let's just synthesize this journey for a moment. We started with identity, the necessary challenging of the stories you tell about yourself. That self-disruption leads directly to ethics, the empathy gained from genuinely encountering others who live differently.
And finally, attention the practice that sustains this whole philosophical pursuit.